I raised her, fed her, and stood by her through everything. But when it was her turn to stand by me, she didn't even save me a seat. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 60 years old, and for the past 3 decades, my life has revolved around 2 things: survival and love. The kind of love that quietly sacrifices, that shows up without being asked, that gives without ever keeping score. I live in a modest house in Vermont, tucked away at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees that blush red in the fall. People say it's peaceful here, and it is. But peace doesn't always mean stillness inside. When my husband, Michael, passed away suddenly from a heart attack, I was just 31. Natalie was 9, and Brian had just turned 6. I still remember the way they looked at me at his funeral, confused, scared, clinging to my hands like I was the only thing left keeping them from falling apart. And from that moment on, I became everything. The mother, the father, the anchor, the provider. My dreams? I used to have them. I wanted to go back to school, maybe become a therapist or open a little bookshop with a coffee corner. But dreams are delicate things. They don't always survive in the face of electric bills, orthodontist appointments, or the cost of college textbooks. So I set mine aside, folded them neatly into the back of my mind, and got to work. I took a job as an office manager at a small insurance company in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. 30 years later, I'm still in the same role. I was never the one who climbed the ladder or made big waves. I just showed up, early, every single day, filed the reports, ran payroll, fixed the jammed printer when no one else could, and made sure the break room was stocked with decent coffee. People called me dependable. That was the word they used. Not brilliant, not irreplaceable, just dependable. But if there's one thing I did with absolute conviction, it was show up for my children. When Natalie wanted to attend an out-of-state college, I said yes, even though it meant taking on a second mortgage. When Brian lost his job and needed help covering rent, I said yes, without blinking. When they moved, once to Boston, once to Denver, I paid for movers, deposits, even flew out to help them unpack. I co-signed loans. I covered dental work. I stayed up late editing resumes and wiring emergency money. My answer, always, was, yes. Because isn't that what love does? I told myself they'd remember. That one day, they'd see the years I carved out for them, the sleep I gave up, the birthdays I spent alone, the vacations I never took. I believed that my presence, my consistency, would be the kind of legacy they'd treasure. I didn't want statues or parades. Just maybe, a seat at the table. A moment where they'd look back and say, we couldn't have done it without you, Mom. But love doesn't always echo the way you think it will. And as I would soon learn, sometimes the people we raise with unconditional love grow into adults who place conditions on their own. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet, uneventful, like most evenings in my small Vermont home. The tea had just steeped, the smell of chamomile curling around the room, and I was folding a blanket when the notification pinged on my laptop. Natalie Parker, wedding info. No subject line, no, hi mom, or even, hey. Just, words. Cold, typed out words on a screen that didn't feel like they came from the daughter I had nursed through chickenpox, who used to fall asleep on my chest after long school days. Hey, just wanted to let you know we'll be live streaming the ceremony next month. You can watch it from home. Trying to keep it super small, Dan's parents don't want a big crowd. Hope you understand. Lol. 3 letters. That's what she ended the message with. Not, love you, Mom. Not, wish you could be there. Just, lol. I sat there for a while, rereading the message like I had missed something. Maybe there was a second part. Maybe the real email was coming later. Maybe she had hit send by accident, and she'd call me any minute now to say, oh my God, Mom, can you believe I forgot to put you on the guest list? But that call never came. Instead, I stared at the email, the cursor blinking below it like it was waiting for me to respond with something, anything. And the strangest thing happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't feel anger clawing at my chest like I expected. What I felt was emptiness. Like I'd been erased. Like the space I used to occupy in her life had been quietly vacuumed out, and she hadn't even noticed the hollow echo left behind. I had pictured her wedding so many times. I thought I'd be helping her pick a dress, holding her bouquet before she walked down the aisle, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead and whispering, "You're going to be fine, sweetheart." Instead, I was offered a live stream. Like a stranger. Like a fan. I didn't even know how to reply. Every draft I started, "Natalie, this hurts," or, "I thought I'd be there," felt too needy, too desperate, too embarrassing. So, I closed the laptop and folded the blanket again, slower this time. My hands were shaking, not from rage, but from a realization. Somewhere along the line, I had become invisible to the person I loved most. And the saddest part? She didn't even notice I'd disappeared. I closed the laptop that night, trying to push it all away. But sleep never came. The silence in my room felt heavier than any words could. I lay there in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to understand how everything I gave, years of sacrifice, late nights, worry, unconditional love, had led to a 5-line email with a "lol" at the end. I kept seeing the message in my mind, over and over again. Her wedding, live streamed. Me, the mother who raised her through scraped knees and heartbreaks, was now reduced to a spectator on a screen. And then that flippant, "lol," like the whole thing was a joke. Around midnight, I got up, walked to the kitchen, made tea I didn't drink. My hands moved on autopilot, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I sat down again, reopened the laptop, and stared at her email. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a trace of warmth I had overlooked. "Wish you could be there," or even a "love you, Mom." There wasn't. Just a flat message. Excuses dressed up as practicality. No acknowledgement that I had transferred $30,000 to her savings account a month ago, money I'd quietly pulled from my retirement plan, just so she could have the wedding of her dreams. There had been no thank you after that transfer either. I'd told myself that it didn't matter. That parents don't give to get. That the joy on her face, someday, would be enough. Now, all I had was a livestream link and the sense that my presence wasn't just unimportant, it was unwanted. I typed slowly, every word feeling like it was being pulled from a deep, aching part of me. "Sure. Enjoy your big day." Then I hit send. And that was it. No anger. No screaming. No dramatic reply. Just silence. Not the kind that waits for something to be filled, but the kind that settles into your bones. The next morning, I got ready for work like any other day. But when I got in the car, I didn't turn on the radio. I always did. Talk shows, music from the 80s, the familiar chatter that kept me company on my commute. But that day, the silence followed me from my bedroom to my car, and it wrapped itself around me like a fog. I didn't feel rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel betrayed. I just felt erased. As if I'd spent decades writing a story that someone else decided to skip to the end of, without even reading the parts where I fought to keep the pages from falling apart. And for the first time in years, I didn't know who I was outside of being a mother. People often romanticize unconditional love. They speak of it like it's some sacred vow, beautiful, noble, almost effortless. But what they don't say is that unconditional love comes with a bill. And sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who forget to pay. After Natalie's text, I found myself replaying moments I hadn't thought about in years. Not in anger. Just trying to make sense of how we got here. I remembered the Christmas I pawned the gold earrings my mother had left me, just so I could buy Natalie the violin she fell in love with at school. She played it for exactly 3 months before quitting, but her eyes had sparkled that morning when she opened the case. That sparkle was worth it. Or so I told myself. I remembered the time I had strep throat and a fever pushing 102, but still stood in line at 5 a.m. in front of the district office to make sure Brian got into the magnet program he'd dreamed of. I didn't want them to feel the absence of a father. So I became the wall, the roof, the floor. Everything. There was also Mark. A good man. Gentle. Patient. He wanted to marry me when the kids were in high school. He even brought flowers to Brian's baseball game once. I remember watching Brian recoil, Natalie going quiet, her face unreadable. That night, I told Mark it wasn't the right time. He left without saying a word. I never told the kids. I figured they didn't need to carry that weight. And there was the surgery I postponed, twice, because Natalie had finals and Brian had summer camp and I didn't want them to worry. The lump turned out to be benign, thank God. But I spent 2 months sleeping sitting up, unable to tell anyone why I flinched when I raised my arm. These weren't sacrifices I kept track of. I didn't file them under reasons you should love me forever. I did them because I'm their mother. It's what we do. We absorb. We quiet our needs, tuck them beneath grocery lists and permission slips and missed dentist appointments. But now, sitting on that couch after sending her $30,000 for a wedding I wasn't invited to, I realized something that sat cold and sharp in my chest. In Natalie's story, I wasn't part of the next chapter. I was a prologue, a faded photograph in the album, acknowledged with a soft smile, then turned away. Unconditional love means giving without expecting anything in return. I thought I understood that. But I didn't know it could also mean becoming invisible. And that's a price I didn't know I'd agreed to pay. I sat alone in my car, engine off, keys dangling from the ignition. The radio was silent, but in my mind, something louder echoed, a truth I couldn't unsee. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a transaction. That $30,000 I sent a month ago wasn't a gift of love, it was a payment. A deposit to be quietly processed, acknowledged with silence. Natalie hadn't even replied with a thank you. Just a thumbs up emoji when I confirmed the wire transfer. I should have seen it then. And now? Now it was obvious. When love becomes a line item on someone else's balance sheet, you start to understand your place in their life. I wasn't on the guest list because my role was over. My usefulness had expired the moment the check cleared. There was a time, God, I remember it so clearly, when Natalie twirled around the kitchen in her pajamas and told me, "You'll be the first person I call when I get engaged, Mom." Her face had been so full of light back then, like she couldn't imagine a life event without me. Now, she couldn't even be bothered to pick up the phone. It's not the lack of invitation that stings, it's what it means. It means I've become a service provider, not a mother. It means that somewhere along the line, my love became something measured in dollars, not memories. If I hadn't sent the money, would she have called? Would she have said, "I want you there"? Or would I have been invisible anyway? I don't think I want the answer. Because the moment love becomes conditional, it stops being love. And the truth, the one I couldn't deny anymore, was that for my daughter, I wasn't a person. I was a purse. And when the purse closes, so does the door. I sat in my car for what felt like forever, letting the silence press in. The realization stung deeper than I expected, that my love had become transactional. That I was no longer Mom, just the woman who paid the invoices. Somewhere between the years of sacrifice and today's polite rejection, the relationship had shifted. I used to think love was proven in what you give. But now I was starting to wonder, what do you become when your giving is no longer enough? That's when I remembered the second half of the wedding payment, $60,000, scheduled to be transferred on Monday. A final installment to cover the reception, catering, dress alterations, and who knows what else. I'd already sent the first $30,000 a month ago, no questions asked. I didn't even wait to be thanked. I thought that was what mothers do, make things easier, cover the costs, stay in the background. But today, something inside me cracked. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I just drove straight to the bank. When I walked in, Marcus, the branch manager, looked up and smiled with that familiar, cautious kindness. We'd crossed paths before, back when I took out a personal loan to help Natalie cover her first year of grad school. "I need to cancel a scheduled transfer," I said. He turned to his screen. "The 60,000? I nodded. He blinked. "Are you sure?" I let out a quiet breath. "Yes," I said, steady and certain. "For the first time in a long while, I am." He didn't ask any more questions. As he clicked through the forms, my mind wandered to the wedding binder sitting in my hallway closet. I'd spent weeks, no, months, obsessing over flower arrangements, menu options, even seat assignments. I wanted everything to be perfect. Better than my own wedding ever was. And it wasn't even about impressing anyone. It was about giving Natalie the joy I never had. I wanted to gift her a moment where everything felt safe and beautiful and secure. I never expected a spotlight. I didn't need a toast. I only hoped for a hug, a glance, a small acknowledgement that I mattered in the middle of her big day. Instead, I got a generic livestream link and a text that read, "Sure. Enjoy your big day." Marcus handed me the confirmation slip. The transaction was cancelled. I looked down at it like it was more than paper, like it was proof that I could still say no. That I could still choose me. And in that moment, I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel petty. I felt free. That evening, as the street lamps flickered on outside my window, I heard a familiar knock. It wasn't rushed, but it carried weight. I opened the door to find Brian standing there, my son, the quiet one, the steady one. But tonight, his eyes burned with something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager: anger. He stepped inside without a word and stood in the middle of my living room, jaw clenched. "Natalie's falling apart," he finally said. "She called me sobbing. Said you pulled the rest of the wedding money." "What the hell happened, Mom?" I didn't answer immediately. I watched his hands tremble slightly, the same hands I used to bandage after playground tumbles. Brian's always been the one who needed the least, asked the least. And I think, foolishly, I believed that meant he expected less. But now, standing there, I saw it. He had expectations, too. Of me. Of what a mother should endlessly provide. I had planned to give her $60,000 more, I said quietly, to finish paying for her perfect day. But plans change. He looked stunned, as if the idea that I might change my mind, after decades of being predictable, dependable, invisible in my own needs, was a betrayal in itself. The room grew heavy. Memories buzzed in the silence. Late nights helping him with homework, holding him through fevers, scraping together money for his band trip because he was too afraid to ask Dad. I had shown up for them every time. Every single time. "So that's it?" he said. "She makes one mistake and you just pull the rug out from under her?" But it wasn't just one mistake. It was 1,000 cuts over years. It was the gradual erasure of who I was outside of their expectations. It was hearing, "Enjoy your big day," instead of, "Thank you, Mom." I breathed in slowly. "Brian, I love your sister. But I am not a wallet. And I am done begging for a seat at a table I paid for." He blinked. Maybe he didn't expect me to say that. Maybe he thought I'd cry or backtrack. I didn't. When he turned to leave, he didn't slam the door. He just paused at the threshold, as if waiting for me to chase after him like I always had. I didn't. For the first time in years, I felt a strange, aching lightness. The kind that comes after setting down something you didn't realize had been crushing you. I poured myself a cup of tea. And I didn't cry. That night, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. One missed call. Then another. Then 20. By morning, over 40. Natalie had finally noticed my silence. There were text messages too, stacking one after another like apologies in a language she never bothered to learn. "Mom, can we talk? I didn't mean to shut you out. You can still come if you want. Please." She was unraveling, but I didn't feel vindicated. Just quiet. Still. For once, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I sat in the kitchen, fingers grazing the edge of my coffee cup, watching steam rise and dissolve into the air. A small part of me, maybe the old version of me, wanted to type a long reply, one of those carefully worded messages that tried to balance love with disappointment. But I didn't. I'd done enough translating my worth into words. If she didn't see it by now, she never would. Silence wasn't cold. It was clarity. It was me, finally stepping out of the courtroom where I'd been both defendant and defense attorney, pleading for the right to feel hurt. I thought of all the times I'd bent myself into apology just to keep the peace. All the times I paid with both money and guilt to earn a seat at the table of my own children's lives. All the times I'd said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. And I realized, they were never listening to what I said anyway. They were only measuring what I gave. So I said nothing. No anger. No explanation. No counter-offer. There's something sacred about withholding words when every part of you used to scream to be heard. I finally understood that love doesn't have to perform to be real. It doesn't need to yell, or defend, or beg. It can simply exist. And it can choose to walk away. Later that day, Natalie sent one last message. "I'm sorry if I hurt you. I just wanted things to be simple." But that was the thing. Simple for her meant invisible for me. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a walk. I let the wind pull through my sweater, let the rustling leaves be the only noise around me. For once, I didn't carry my phone. I didn't wait for the next apology. I wasn't looking to be invited back. Because real apologies aren't bribes. And love doesn't thrive under terms and conditions. That evening, I slept better than I had in years. It was nearly 8 p.m. when I heard the knock on the door. Not rushed, not urgent, just hesitant. When I opened it, I wasn't greeted by Natalie, but by someone I hadn't seen in years. Ava? I blinked, surprised. She looked older, of course. But the same warm, intelligent eyes met mine. Natalie's best friend from childhood, Ava had practically lived at our house through high school. Sleepovers, school projects, summer afternoons sprawled in the backyard with iced tea and gossip about boys. She used to call me Mom Number 2. I hope I'm not intruding, she said, holding a small box of chamomile tea. I wasn't sure if you'd even remember me. I smiled softly and stepped aside. Of course I remember you. We sat at the kitchen table. 2 steaming cups between us, the air thick with everything unspoken. She stirred her tea, eyes lowered. I didn't know who else to talk to. Things have been bad. The weddings, well, it's kind of falling apart. I didn't say anything. I let her speak, let the silence offer permission. The venue cancelled, payment issue. The flowers backed out. The groom's family is threatening to pull out if Natalie doesn't get her act together. And Ava paused, as if trying to choose her words carefully. She's spiraling. She doesn't even know where to begin fixing it all. I felt no joy in her unraveling. No petty satisfaction. Only a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. Things built on imbalance tend to collapse under their own weight. Ava took a breath, then looked at me with a softness that reminded me of the girl she once was. She asked me to come. She thought maybe you'd listen to me. That maybe I could say something to change your mind. Another long pause. Is there anything, she asked, Natalie could do to make this right with you? To bring you back in? I looked down at my tea, then out the window where the last trace of daylight melted into the horizon. I thought about all the years I'd sacrificed not just money, but pieces of myself. I remembered the nights I watched Natalie sleep while I filled out financial aid forms by candlelight. I remembered skipping meals so she wouldn't have to skip field trips. I remembered every birthday cake I made from scratch even when we couldn't afford the frosting. I remembered how none of it was ever really seen, only expected. And now that the support had stopped, the panic set in. I looked at Ava and said quietly, but clearly, no, there's nothing she can do now. Ava blinked. Nothing? I shook my head. Because real love doesn't wait until you're gone to recognize your value. Real love doesn't need a crisis to remember your name. She sat back, and for a moment, I saw understanding settle into her expression. Not agreement, but understanding. We finished our tea mostly in silence. When she left, she hugged me tightly. It was the kind of hug I hadn't felt in years, unburdened by guilt or conditions. I closed the door behind her, and the house felt still. But not empty. For the first time in a long time, my love wasn't being negotiated. It simply was. The wedding did happen, eventually. Not at the country estate, not with a 4-tier cake and a jazz quartet. It was something much smaller, Natalie's backyard, a handful of friends, string lights they probably hung up themselves. There were no engraved invitations. No program. No mother of the bride seated in the front row. I wasn't invited. And strangely, I didn't need to be. That morning, I didn't sit by the phone or check my inbox, hoping she'd change her mind. I knew she wouldn't. And I also knew, I no longer needed her to. Instead, I spent the day walking through the art supply store near the square, fingering the rough edges of unglazed clay. I signed up for a 6-week pottery course. Beginner level. Wednesday nights. I used to make excuses for not doing things like this. Too tired, too busy, too old. Now, I only needed one reason, because I wanted to. Later that evening, I made dinner with Helen, an old college friend I'd reconnected with recently. We laughed over grilled vegetables and red wine, shared stories of who we were before motherhood turned us into ghosts of ourselves. When I got home, there was an email waiting from Natalie. A long one. I made myself a cup of mint tea before reading it. The tone drifted somewhere between apology and justification. I wasn't thinking straight, everyone was pressuring me, you've always been so strong. She said she missed me. Said she'd understand if I never responded, but she hoped I would. I read it once, then once more, then I clicked archive. I didn't feel angry, or triumphant. I didn't feel anything theatrical. just calm. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. In the weeks that followed, I found rhythm in small things. Throwing clay on a wheel, watching it wobble, collapse, and rise again. Reading old poetry on the porch while the sun dipped behind the rooftops. Listening to Nina Simone and humming along without shame. For so long, I'd poured myself into everyone else's lives like water into a sieve, never asking who I might be when I finally ran dry. Now, at last, I was learning. Not to hate, not to punish, just to belong to myself again. I never thought peace would look like this. So quiet, so undramatic, so earned. And if Natalie ever truly wanted to understand what she'd lost, she would have to come find me, not with guilt, not with need, but with truth. Until then, I no longer waited to be chosen. Because if my presence is optional, so is my sacrifice.